Admiral Lyons commanded the largest fleet in the globe's history, the Pacific Fleet. He was its commander-in-chief. He has done an amazing amount of work with Red Cell. Learn about this man. He has not only commanded, but he has advised presidents, other commanders. He has helped build a structure. My uncle served in the years when Admiral Lyons was a commander, and I can tell you that the one thing I thought of when I woke up this morning, I was going through the list, and I said, Ace Lyons is here, and we seem to run into each other in cities around the country over the years. I looked out, saw rain, and I went, it's a Navy day. Admiral Ace Lyons, sir, it's a pleasure as always.
Thank you. Well, with that warm introduction, I'm ready for your Q's and A's. Well, first, let me say I want to thank you all for coming on this raining morning. And the next thing I want to see, let me see the hands of all former veterans. Please join me in giving them a big hand. Yeah. Now, your presence here this morning says it all. You understand we have a constitutional problem. And we have that problem because our congressional leadership doesn't understand why they were put there. They were put there to stop the fundamental transformation of America, not to facilitate it. And the second problem which you recognize is when we have a president who is not interested in America leading or American winning, we have a serious national security problem. And the greatest threat to our national security resides at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Now, I got to tell you, never in my lifetime did I believe I would witness this great country being taken down and withdrawn from our world leadership role by our own administration. And we've had many opportunities over the years to change the course of history. And it hasn't mattered whether it was a Democratic or Republican administration. They all failed. And let me give you a few examples. Modern day Islamic fundamentalism really got its start in November 1979, when Iran took over our embassy in Tehran. At that time, I was a director of political and military affairs for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The chairman called me up and he said, what are we going to do? Do we have any options? And I said, oh, we've got a great option. We're going in and take Kharg Island. Kharg Island was their main exporting oil depot. We could have walked in with our Navy SEALs. And what we were going to do is give them 24 hours to get out of our embassy and release our hostages. Otherwise, they were going to have the biggest ashtray in the Middle East. We could have cut off Islamic fundamentalism at the knees, right then and there. And Carter rejected it. It's no surprise to this group. And the next time is the Marine barracks bombing. And I'm sure you're all wondering, how come we never responded? It was the greatest loss of marine life since Iwo Jima. I got to tell you, we had the planes loaded. I'm going to cut out a lot of the background here in the interest of time. And we knew exactly where the culprits were holed up. It was the Islamic Amal and Hezbollah and the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. We know the orders for that bombing came from Tehran through the Iranian ambassador in Damascus. And I'll touch on this in a minute, a little bit more. We had the planes loaded, and the words of the Carrier Task Group Commander, Jerry Tuttle, this was a chip shot. We were going to make the Sheikh Abdullah barracks, where they were all holed up, which is the former Lebanese army barracks, above Baalbek. We were going to make it look like a plowed cornfield in Kansas. And I'm glad you're all sitting down, because you're saying, well, why didn't we strike? Because the guy that sabotaged the strike was none other than our Secretary of Defense, Caspar Weinberger. Now, he did it not only once, but twice. But I had, who got to him? What got to him? And I have finally concluded it was the Iranian Washington lobby group. Very powerful group and great influence. The second time he did it, President Reagan, and you recall the French had their barracks bombed as well, they wanted to do a combined strike with us. And he approved it. And Weinberger wouldn't issue the orders. Unbelievable. You can't make this up. I personally talked to George Shultz, our Secretary of State at that time, Bud McFarlane, our National Security Advisor. They pleaded with him to release the execute order. He wouldn't do it. Should have been fired on the spot. And all that junk you read in Reagan's diary, that's what it is, fiction on what Weinberger told him. And the main thing, he said, well, we didn't really have to go. And you'll read it in the diary. The French totally wiped them out. Well, that was nonsense. They dropped 2 500-pound bombs and killed a goat. Now, when you want to take a country down, the first thing you do is weaken the military. That's why sequestration was the perfect storm for the Obama administration. It provided the legal basis for the unilateral disarmament of our military. And I got to tell you, the defense budget represents roughly 17+% of the federal budget. But under sequestration, defense was required to absorb 50%. That's over $1 trillion in 10 years. With the world in turmoil, the greatest instability since World War II, does this make any sense? Of course not. And as a result of this, what did we wind up with? We got the smallest army since World War II. We're headed towards 380,000 troops. You know, the Chief of Staff of the Army, the previous one, said he wasn't sure he could handle an intense regional conflict. The Army is down to 10 divisions. They should have as a minimum 14. And then we move to the Navy. Well, we are headed for the smallest Navy, not since World War II, but World War I. We are down to 273 ships. And to put that number in perspective, that's about the number of ships I had under my command of the Pacific Fleet. That's what's left of Ronald Reagan's 600-ship Navy. Unbelievable. And with what we should have, we need to meet our worldwide commitments. We need 350 to 400 ships. We should have a minimum of 12 carriers. I prefer 15. That's what I had. But with the anemic shipbuilding program we have, which is roughly 10 ships a year, we're never going to get there. And with the cost overruns and the mismanagement, all of this has got to stop. We can't afford it. And I got to tell you, China's building 60 ships a year. That ought to scare the hell out of you. They're building a Navy to confront the United States Navy. It's as clear as the nose on your face. Here we move to the Air Force. The Air Force is going to be the smallest in its history. They're down to 10 wings. They should have a minimum of 18 wings. And just as important, their readiness is down to 50%. And it should be up at 85%. And that applies to all the forces. Army, Navy, Air Force. And the Marines are suffering the same problems. Now, compounding this unilateral disarmament is the social engineering that has been imposed on our military forces, mostly by people who have never served in the military and will never serve in the military. Furthermore, we don't want them in the military. You know, the latest example is Secretary Ash Carter's pronouncement of opening up all combat roles to women. And of course, he based this on his vast military background, all of which he received at the ivy-covered walls of Yale. Overrode all previous studies, the recent Marine Corps study, unbelievable. I got to tell you, there are many viable roles for women in the military. Combat is not one of them. Now, we've had many other examples, and in fact, when he made that announcement, he cited as a great success the removal of don't ask, don't tell. Well, I got to tell you, as of 2014, there were over 10,000, reported now, 10,000 male-on-male incidents. And if he considers that a great success, I'd sure hate like hell to see what he considers failure. It's a tragedy that must be reversed. Now, I have to tell you, the Obama administration has great difficulty in identifying the enemy. But I think it was Erdogan, when he was Prime Minister of Turkey, said it best. Islam is Islam. There are no modifiers. Democracy is the train we ride to our ultimate objective, Islamic world domination and the imposition of that draconian Sharia law. And until you recognize that Islam is a political movement masquerading as a religion, you will not be successful in defeating the threat. Now, you've heard a lot of talk about Obama administration has no strategy. Well, let me tell you, they're all wrong. He has executed his strategy brilliantly with the complicity of our ineffective congressional leadership and the mainstream media. Any thinking American can grasp it. It's embedded in his declaration to fundamentally transform America. It is anti-American, anti-Western, but pro-Islam, pro-Iranian, and pro-Muslim Brotherhood. Now, I got to ask you, why would an American president embrace the Muslim Brotherhood, whose creed is to destroy us from within by our own miserable hands? They have been penetrated all our national security and intelligence agencies. And as Claire pointed out, all our other government agencies. It's gone on for years. It's as deep or deeper than the communist penetration of the 30s, 40s, and 50s. This is a tragedy. Now, what are we going to do about it? Well, there has to be a massive effort here. And I leave that up to you to continue the push towards removing them from every one of our agencies. Now, let me talk a little bit about Iran. Okay? The Iranian nuclear deal. All right. And before I do that, I want to go back to the social engineering where it has undercut the moral fiber of our military forces, unit integrity, cohesiveness, and the will to win. And the most recent example of the impact on that will to win, you all witnessed last Tuesday. The surrender of our 2 riverine craft. Now, I'm trying to get as much information as possible because none of this smells right. You know, I have to speculate here a little bit, but why would you send these 2 riverine craft out at sunset to rendezvous with a replenishment tanker in the northern Persian Gulf at 0300 in the morning? That just doesn't make any sense to me. Now, I got to tell you, I'm aware there are very restricted rules of engagement on our forces in the Persian Gulf. And if it approaches those restricted rules that our forces are forced to fight on land, we got a problem. And I got to tell you, when I was in command, I put myself in the place of that commander of a ship. And I said, what do I want? I want to be unshackled. So I put out an order to all my forces. You will not take the first hit. And this was geared against Iran. And I said, I will back you up. And I put it in writing. And I have to tell you, I didn't go back to Washington and say, may I? Now, let me talk a little bit about this Iranian nuclear deal, which is a total sham. Okay? And let me just say one other thing about that incident in the Gulf. Doesn't it strike you as strange that suddenly we've got two well-armed riverine craft surrendering? I don't even know if they actually penetrated the territorial waters of that island. But it doesn't matter. Under international law, you've got the right of incident transit. Happens all over the world. And the host nation just escorts you out. But then here, 4 days later, what do we have? 4 or 5 hostages released. My, what a coincidence. And here, wasn't this wonderful? We did this deal with Iran, and look how we welcome them back into the international community, knowing the deviousness and the manipulation that this administration does with the mainstream media. I have to tell you, none of this passes the smell test. Now, the Iranian nuclear deal. Let me whip through this real fast. Let me take you back to the summer of 2008, when Obama received the Democratic Party nomination for the presidency. He opened up a secret channel to the Ayatollahs in Iran. That secret channel was Ambassador William G. Miller. And the message was, don't do a deal with the Bush administration. Wait till I'm president. You'll get a much better deal. You will see. You will like my policies. I am your friend. Unbelievable. This was clearly a violation of the Logan Act, and to me, borders on treason. This deal is not verifiable. We gave up every one of our objectives. We had to invent new concessions to keep them at the table. We're going to let them inspect themselves. We're going to show them how to protect their facilities against terrorist attack. The world's leading state sponsor of terror. We're going to tell them how to protect it. And we're also going to show them how to protect it against a cyber attack. This is crazy. And, you know, it's turning over $150 billion, which we know where it's going, is just makes no sense. And while we were glad to get back our hostages, I have to ask you, was all of this worth giving Iran a path to a nuclear weapon to put in jeopardy 320 million American lives? Let me quickly wrap up with a couple of words on Benghazi before David gives me the hook. I'm over. Well, let's go to Benghazi and the pathological liar Hillary. I got to tell you, Benghazi never had to happen. The first thing you need to know about the Libyan disaster, we switched sides. We facilitated the armament or armed Al-Qaeda and Muslim Brotherhood militias. And I got to tell you, there was 10 days advance warning of this attack. Besides, there was a whole bunch of strategic and tactical warnings leading up to 11 September, plus Stevens' repeated requests for increased security, all of which was turned down by Hillary's State Department. Now, so what happened? 10 days advance warning. I got this from the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, Mike Flynn, and from the 13 hours CIA Special Forces contractor personnel. They all signed it. And I encourage you all, go see that 13 Hours movie. Now you have to know, we had forces that could have responded. We had the commanders in Stremis Force, 50 special forces in Croatia with their own aircraft. In fact, they were en route and were turned around and made to land in Sigonella. We had a 130-man Marine Force recon team in Sigonella. We had 2 Marine fast teams in Rota. We had F-16 aircraft that could have gotten there in 2 hours. And of course, our 13 Hours group believe if they were not held up and told to stand down, they could have saved Ambassador Stevens' life. All right. So I talked to Ham Carter. I said, Ham, what about these 10 days advance warning? Well, he didn't know anything about that. And he said, anyway, we were focused on Tunisia. And the last time I looked at a chart, Tunisia borders Libya. So I said, well, where were the forces positioned to respond to an event in Tunisia? Well, there weren't any. And I got to tell you, as a commander, you never want to be caught short. You pre-position your forces to respond, but in my view, I like to preempt. What happened in Libya was a pure dereliction of duty on a number of echelons, starting from the White House on down. It's the same dereliction of duty that resulted in Extortion 17 with the loss of 30 special forces, including 15 SEAL Tick 6 personnel. When I first heard about that disaster, I said, who the hell ever puts 30 special forces in a transportation helicopter? And the other little part, when you swap out the 6 Afghan special forces with a group you don't even know their names, that should have been enough to cancel that mission. And of course, it was the stupid rules of engagement which prevented the circling overhead AC-130 gunship for preparing the landing zone, because there was a firefight going on for over 3 hours. You never send a transportation helicopter into a hot fire zone. You know, I got to tell you, all these restricted rules of engagement, which I believe the Muslim Brotherhood had an impact on, is an attempt to win the hearts and minds of a tribal society while we're sacrificing the lives of our military personnel, is unconscionable. Let me tell you, in the Middle East, the only thing matters is street respect. And the way you get street respect, you kill them into submission, and I guarantee you the hearts and minds will follow. It's great to be with you. God bless America, and we will take back America.
Give me a hand, David. My legs are dead.
All right. Yeah, I know that. All right, you got it? All right.